The valley trembled with silence so heavy it felt alive. Then, without warning, a roar split the dawn like thunder, cracking the bones of the earth. The herd froze mid-step, dust swirling around their trembling legs, as though the sound itself shackled them. A lioness emerged from the tall grass, her golden body low, her amber eyes burning with hunger. The narrator said, "This was not a warning but a sentence, the roar of inevitability that no creature could outrun." A calf pressed close to its mother, his eyes wide with fear, too young to understand the finality already descending. A young bull stamped the ground, torn between fight and flight, but the air was heavy with doom. Nature gave no time for thought. Every breath became shallow, and every shadow in the grass grew teeth. The valley was no longer a sanctuary, it was a trap that pulsed with the certainty of blood. The narrator whispered, "Here begins survival's cruelest truth. In the roar, every heartbeat is already numbered." The narrator said, "The silence after the roar was sharper than the roar itself." A young calf buried its head beneath its mother's chest, while the herd swayed like reeds in a storm, indecisive and broken. The lioness did not move. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough to fracture every fragile sense of safety. Shadows stretched long as the sun climbed, painting each creature as both victim and witness. A bull grunted, his body taut, but his eyes betrayed fear. The valley seemed endless yet suffocating, every path a trap. Breath by breath, the herd felt the weight of time. It was not running they feared. It was knowing they could not run forever. The narrator whispered, "Here in the open, survival is not a choice but a sentence handed down in silence." The herd knew it, the lioness knew it, and the valley itself waited for blood to confirm it. The narrator said, "Fear travels faster than sound." From one startled glance to another, it spread through the herd until even the strongest trembled. A young calf whimpered softly, muffled against his mother, while the bull shifted, hooves scraping stone. The lioness blinked once, slow and deliberate, as if time itself bent to her patience. Her hunger was steady, old as the valley, unhurried yet merciless. Above them vultures circled lazily, their wings catching the light in mocking arcs. Even the wind paused, holding its breath. The narrator said, "In moments like this, death is not distant. It circles above. It crouches in the grass. It stares through trembling eyes." The air grew heavier, pressing down on the herd until every twitch carried the weight of a scream not yet given. The narrator said, "Predators know the language of waiting." The lioness shifted her weight, barely an inch, yet the herd rippled as if struck. A calf stumbled, his legs too weak for the fear coursing through him. His mother nudged him upright, her eyes locked not on the predator, but on the space around her, searching for a path that did not exist. The bull's grunts deepened, low and guttural, each one a call that dared to mask his fear. Dust rose in gentle spirals as the herd edged together tighter, like a single trembling body with 1,000 eyes. The narrator whispered, "It is not the chase that breaks them, but the waiting, the silence between the roar and the strike." In that pause, nature held them captive. The narrator said, "Every predator knows the herd will break. The only question is when." The lioness lowered herself even further, body vanishing into the grass like a shadow dissolving. The herd shuddered as one, the air vibrating with shared dread. A young calf pressed closer, trembling so fiercely his legs threatened collapse. The bull roared, a harsh defiance, but it echoed hollow, swallowed by the valley. Above, vultures tilted their wings, circling tighter. The narrator continued, "The valley knows this ritual. It has seen it countless times. It knows the dust will rise, the cries will echo, and the grass will drink deeply before the day ends." For predator and prey alike, the script was already written, and the opening line had been delivered in a single devastating roar. The narrator said, "From the herd's trembling heart rose a fragile figure." A calf stood close to his mother, his legs thin, trembling beneath the weight of fear and inexperience. His eyes were wide, uncomprehending of the laws that governed the valley, but his existence carried the weight of generations. Every stumble, every shallow breath, was a reminder of life balanced on a fragile thread. The mother's muscles tensed as her head turned sharply toward the grass where the predator hid. She pressed her calf closer, her body forming a shield carved from desperation and love. The herd shifted again, but in this moment, survival shrank down to two figures, one too young to defend himself and one determined to face the storm. The narrator said, "This is where empathy is born, in the helpless eyes of innocence and the silent vow of those who refuse to abandon it." The narrator said, "The calf was not just another life in the herd, he was the story's fragile anchor." Around him the herd swayed uneasily, but his fear radiated stronger than any other. His ears flicked at every whisper of wind, his tail twitched at shadows that held no shape. The mother lowered her head, nudging his flank with steady resolve, her eyes scanning the grass for threats she already knew were there. A bull stepped closer, his body taut, as if daring the predator to strike, but his eyes betrayed doubt. Above them, vultures circled lower, their patience a cruel echo of the lioness hidden below. The narrator said, "What is at stake is not strength or dominance, but innocence itself, and innocence cannot protect itself." The narrator said, "Every herd carries a story, but only some carry a heartbeat the world dares not lose." The calf stumbled forward, his legs barely strong enough to keep pace, yet his mother remained by his side. She turned her body against the shifting herd, ensuring he was never pushed aside or lost. The lioness crouched lower, patient, her eyes never leaving the fragile figure. Hunger demanded she choose weakness, and here weakness was clear. The herd pressed together tighter, driven by instinct, but the bond between mother and calf cut through the chaos with painful clarity. The narrator whispered, "To care is to risk everything in a world where care is punished. Yet it is this risk that gives meaning to survival." The narrator said, "Strength is not measured in horns or hooves, but in the willingness to stand between danger and the defenseless." The mother nudged the calf toward the herd's center, a living wall meant to hide him. But the herd was restless, pressed inward by fear, hooves threatening to trample what they sought to protect. The bull grunted, calling the herd to order, yet his eyes flicked constantly toward the grass. The calf stumbled again, falling to his knees, dust coating his hide. The mother bent low, pulling him upright with a force both gentle and desperate. The narrator said, "She cannot fight the lioness. She cannot fight the valley, but she can fight despair, and that is why she matters." The narrator said, "The calf was not only a child of the herd, but a fragile promise, a symbol of tomorrow. His innocence drew the predator's eye as surely as blood, yet it also drew the audience's heart." The mother's sides heaved with the strain of keeping him upright, her breath sharp, but her eyes unbroken. The bull circled once, feigning bravery, yet retreating the moment the lioness shifted her gaze. The herd swayed, torn between abandoning the weak and clinging to them. The narrator whispered, "In this fragile creature lies the truth of survival, that the fight is never for power, but for continuity. The desperate hope that one fragile life might outlast the storm." The narrator said, "The valley shifted from silence to threat. A hot wind swept the grass, carrying the scent of fear. The lioness crouched lower, her muscles twitching with restrained violence. The calf stumbled as dust caught in his throat. His mother pressed closer, her body a wall of defiance. The bull stomped again, but his defiance sounded hollow. Around them, the herd tightened, their bodies crashing together in frantic waves. Above, vultures spiraled lower, anticipating collapse. The narrator said, "Conflict is not sudden. It is a tide that rises, pulling everything toward its breaking point." The air grew heavier, as if the valley itself prepared to devour. The narrator said, "Hunger drives patience into urgency." The lioness crept closer, her golden coat blending into the grass, every movement smooth as shadow. The calf stumbled again, his legs buckling, sending panic through his mother, who nudged him frantically. The bull bellowed, shaking the herd, yet his hooves edged back in fear. Dust rose in spirals as wildebeest pressed tighter, suffocating themselves with fear. Vultures circled closer, their dark wings eclipsing the sun. The narrator said, "Conflict does not ask permission. It builds until the weak cannot stand, and the strong no longer hold. The narrator said, fear became flesh when the herd turned against itself. A wildebeest shoved against the calf, desperate for her own survival. The mother braced, blocking the pressure, eyes wild. The lioness moved 2 steps closer, her tail twitching. The bull lowered his head, horns flashing, his call splitting the air, but he did not advance. Dust coated every flank, turning sweat into mud. The herd jostled violently, driven not by unity but by terror. The narrator whispered, conflict does not wait for the predator. It blooms inside the herd, where fear feeds chaos. Above, vultures screeched, diving lower. The narrator said, survival turns even allies into rivals. The bull shoved forward, his horns clashing against another male, sparks of conflict igniting within the herd. The calf pressed against his mother, trembling at violence not just from predator but from kin. The lioness watched, her hunger sharpening as the herd's unity splintered. Dust choked the valley, the cries of wildebeest mingling with shrill calls of vultures. The narrator said, conflict rises like a storm, each heartbeat louder, each moment nearer collapse. The valley throbbed with panic, and the lioness moved closer still. The narrator said, conflict becomes despair when all paths collapse. The herd pressed so tightly that the calf was nearly crushed, his cries lost in the thunder of hooves. The mother fought desperately, her body straining as she shielded him. The bull, distracted by rivals, left the calf unguarded. The lioness rose from the grass, her silhouette clear now, no longer hiding, hunger demanding the strike. Above, vultures dove low, wings slicing the air. The narrator said, the rising conflict had torn unity apart. Predator need not chase when fear delivers prey. The narrator said, what seemed a simple hunt revealed its hidden layers. The lioness crept closer, her hunger undeniable, yet her body carried the marks of exhaustion, ribs sharp against her skin. She was not only a predator, but also a mother, her cubs hidden in the brush beyond the valley, waiting for her return. The herd only saw death in her eyes, but her struggle mirrored theirs. Survival demanded sacrifice. The calf pressed tighter against his mother, fear clouding his innocence, unaware that the predator's desperation was born from the same law that bound them all. The narrator whispered, here lies the truth. Hunter and hunted are not enemies but equals in suffering, bound together by a cruel thread of survival. The narrator said, the hunter's hunger was not cruelty but necessity. Each step the lioness took was driven not by malice, but by the pull of mouths waiting in silence. Her cubs, too weak to fend for themselves, relied entirely on her success. The calf's mother could not know this, nor could the herd, who saw only death approaching. The bull stamped again, desperate to mask his own trembling, yet even his challenge felt small against the weight of revelation. The narrator said, the prey's innocence and the predator's duty are mirrors, reflecting the same truth. Survival is never clean, never merciful, only absolute. The narrator said, the valley betrayed them all. A sudden wind swept across the grass, revealing the lioness more fully, yet it also drove dust into the herd's eyes, blinding them. The calf stumbled, disoriented, while his mother pulled him back toward her chest. The lioness paused, momentarily caught by the same wind, blinking hard against the grit. The bull lowered his horns, but not at her, at a rival who pressed too close, turning the herd into chaos once again. The narrator whispered, the hidden truth of the valley is that no side is favored. It devours hunter and hunted alike, leaving only those strong enough to endure its indifference. The narrator said, the truth split the valley open. Survival is not good against evil, but need against need. The lioness growled low, not just at the herd but at the hunger gnawing inside her. The calf whimpered, his mother pressing tighter while the bull clashed with his rival, horns cracking like thunder. The herd convulsed in terror, trampling the ground, tearing grass from roots, driven by instinct rather than unity. The lioness shifted her weight, caught between patience and desperation. The narrator whispered, What the herd feared as cruelty was only the reflection of their own struggle, their own desperate fight to preserve what they could not afford to lose. The narrator said, "The revelation struck like lightning. Predator and prey were not enemies but participants in a ritual as old as the earth. The lioness, the mother, the calf, the bull, even the circling vultures, all carried their own battles within the same law. The calf's innocence sharpened the cruelty, but the lioness' desperation carved empathy where only fear had lived. The valley was not a battlefield of villains and victims, but of creatures shackled by the same demand to endure." The narrator said, "The hidden truth is merciless. Nature spares no side. It only writes survival's script in blood and silence." The narrator said, "The storm broke in a heartbeat. The lioness launched from the grass, muscles exploding with brutal grace, her roar shredding the valley air. The herd erupted into chaos, hooves pounding earth, dust turning daylight into smoke. The calf froze, too young to flee, pressed tight against his mother, who forced him forward with desperate strength. The bull lunged sideways, horns lowered, but his charge was wild, more fear than power. The lioness closed the distance, each stride tearing the space between predator and prey." The narrator said, "This was no longer waiting or watching. It was the collision of hunger and innocence, of inevitability and defiance, of life crashing into death." The narrator said, "The chase tore the valley apart. The lioness drove forward, her eyes locked on the weakest, her body a weapon honed by hunger. The calf stumbled again, legs sliding in the churned earth, his mother shoving him upright with desperate nudges. Around them, the herd thundered, splitting in every direction, their unity destroyed by fear. The bull clashed briefly with another, horns locking in a frenzy born of panic, wasting his strength while the true danger closed in. Dust blinded the air, cries of terror clashing with the growl of pursuit. The narrator said, "Here, survival was not running faster than death, but running longer than despair." The narrator said, "Defiance met inevitability in a single strike." The lioness lunged, her paws slamming into the ground beside the calf, claws carving soil. The mother wheeled, head lowered, horns slashing through the air in reckless fury. Her body collided with the lioness, momentum crashing predator into dust. The calf stumbled away, legs trembling, eyes wide with terror. The bull roared, shaking the valley, though his own horns were locked in rival combat. The narrator said, "The clash was not predator against prey but mother against fate, a stand carved from love, a strike born of desperation that demanded the impossible." The narrator said, "The battle tore through dust and cries. The lioness twisted, striking back, her jaws snapping inches from the mother's throat. The mother lunged again, hooves pounding, her muscles straining against an enemy stronger, faster, inevitable. The calf collapsed in the dirt, eyes wild, unable to rise. The herd swirled like a storm around them, bodies smashing into one another, trampling grass, churning earth. The bull's roar drowned in chaos, his defiance crumbling into noise." The narrator said, "The climax of survival is never clean. It is brutal, magnificent, and merciless, a symphony of pain where love and hunger collide in dust and blood." The narrator said, "Every heartbeat thundered like the end of the world." The lioness struck once more, her claws raking the mother's flank, drawing blood that darkened the dust. The calf screamed, his cry piercing through the chaos. The mother staggered, but did not fall, her eyes still locked on her child, her body refusing surrender. The herd tore across the valley, their panic a storm that would not stop until exhaustion broke them. Above, vultures dove low, shadows stretching over the fight. The narrator whispered, "This is survival's climax, not victory or defeat, but the breaking point where sacrifice and inevitability clash, and the valley itself holds its breath." The narrator said, "When the storm of violence broke, silence fell heavier than dust. The lioness stood panting, her claws stained, her eyes burning with hunger and fatigue. The mother staggered, flanks torn, yet still positioned herself between danger and her calf. The calf trembled, weak, his cries fading into the roar of departing hooves, as the herd vanished into distance. Vultures circled lower, their wings whispering inevitability. The narrator said in this moment, survival was no triumph, only endurance, the kind that leaves scars deeper than wounds and memories heavier than flesh. The narrator said, the mother's breath came sharp and ragged, but her eyes did not break. Her body swayed with exhaustion, blood dripping into the dust, yet she lowered her head to nudge the calf upright once more. The lioness prowled closer, torn between striking again and retreating to save her own strength. The calf stumbled forward, clinging to his mother's side. The herd had abandoned them, their thunder now only an echo in the distance. The narrator whispered, resolution comes not in victory or loss, but in the inevitability that survival has no kindness, only consequence. The narrator said, the valley watched, indifferent, as both sides faltered. The lioness growled low, her body quivering with hunger, but her eyes flicked toward the brush where her cubs waited unseen. She could end this, yet her own survival was tethered to mouths she had not fed. The mother shifted, bleeding heavily, legs shaking, but still blocking the calf from harm. The calf pressed tighter, his innocence bound to her sacrifice. The narrator said, the resolution revealed itself not as triumph but as choice. One life preserved, another delayed, both carrying wounds that time itself would not erase. The narrator said, the lioness stepped back, not in mercy, but in exhaustion and duty. Her eyes burned, yet she turned toward the brush, her hunger unfulfilled but her purpose redirected. The mother collapsed briefly, sides heaving but rose again, trembling. The calf leaned into her, pressing his face against her chest, eyes wide with terror but alive. Above, vultures circled in frustration, their cries harsh against the sky. The narrator said, resolution in nature is not clean, not gentle. It is survival purchased at a price. Blood spilled, strength lost, and futures uncertain. The narrator said when the valley grew quiet again, the truth lingered heavy in the air. The lioness vanished into the brush, carrying hunger and obligation. The mother swayed but remained standing, her calf trembling beneath her shadow. The herd was gone, unity shattered, leaving only survivors marked by dust and blood. The vultures circled above, unsatisfied but waiting, eternal witnesses to the cost of life. The narrator whispered, resolution does not heal. It binds predator and prey to the same truth. Survival is absolute, unforgiving, and eternal. The narrator said, the valley lay quiet, as if holding its breath after the storm. Dust settled slowly, drifting down in golden sheets, coating the wounds of the mother and the trembling hide of her calf. The lioness had vanished into the brush, her cubs waiting in silence, but her absence did not bring peace, only the heavy reminder that survival demanded sacrifice on all sides. The herd was gone, scattered and broken, leaving emptiness where their thunder had once ruled. Above, vultures circled, shadows sweeping across the ground like whispers of unfinished death. The narrator said in silence, the truth echoed louder than any roar. Nature is never merciful, only absolute. The narrator said, the calf's eyes held both terror and innocence, a fragile mirror of all that was at stake. He pressed closer to his mother, his small body trembling, his breath sharp in the cooling air. She lowered her head, touching him gently, her blood staining his coat, yet her touch remained tender, unbroken by pain. The horizon stretched empty, the herd now only ghosts carried by memory. The vultures circled lower, waiting still, knowing the valley always claimed more in time. The narrator whispered, this moment was not triumph, nor defeat, but survival carved thin, held together by love and scars. The narrator said, the lioness carried her hunger away, but her story lingered. In the brush her cubs stirred, waiting for her return, their survival tied to the failure she carried back. She had not taken her prize, but she had not lost her war. Tomorrow, the hunt would begin again. The mother wildebeest swayed on her legs, bleeding but unbroken, the calf pressed beneath her shadow. Two mothers, two stories, both carrying the unbearable truth that the valley gave nothing freely. The narrator said, the echo of their struggle was not in sound but in weight, a heaviness that pressed into every breath the valley took. The narrator said, The valley itself seemed to whisper, carrying the memory of the clash across the plains. The grass swayed gently now, betraying no sign of the chaos that had ripped through it. Yet the ground was scarred, painted with blood and the deep marks of hooves. The vultures circled higher, their cries fading into distance, disappointed witnesses of a battle unresolved. The mother lowered her head once more, breathing into her calf's trembling ear, as if promising endurance against all odds. The narrator said, "The echo of survival was not noise but presence, a silence that carried forever." The narrator said, "And when the night fell, the final echo lingered." The calf pressed against his mother, alive but fragile, the valley's silence wrapping around them. The lioness vanished into shadow, her cubs waiting, her hunger unbroken, her story not yet ended. The herd was gone, their absence deafening, a reminder that survival always demands division. Above, stars emerged, cold and eternal, shining down on predator and prey alike. The narrator whispered, "The last echo is this. In the valley of life and death, no cry, no silence, no heartbeat is ever forgotten."